Welcome to PR Done and Dunner. I'm your host, Bob Geller. Today we are joined by Kourtney Jason, who is the co-founder and president of Pacific and Court, an award-winning Brooklyn-based publicity and digital marketing firm. Welcome. How are you, Kourtney?
I'm doing well, Bob. Thanks so much for having me today. Excited to chat.
Likewise, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate the chance to get your insight on the topic I think we had discussed was talking about how PR pros can improve their success rate pitching journalists. And I figured,
Yes.
right? I figured what better way to do this than to speak with a former journalist such as yourself and one who's built a successful PR practice, no less. So before I launch into the Q&A, maybe you'd want to share with our audience more about your background and track record, just get a little bit more detail.
Sure. So I come from a background of book publicity. I've been doing it for about 15 years. I worked in-house at a couple independent publishers before I moved to the agency side of things. But even before I started my PR career, I actually moved to New York with the dream of being a magazine journalist. I
Ah,
did that for a few years before, I kept seeing magazines folding and shrinking and thought, let's try another industry and see if that
uh,
might be a little more stable. I've worked with, a number of high-profile authors as well as, doctors, experts within their field. Some of my success, I've booked the Today Show many times,
wow,
had some New York Times features, People
nice,
Magazine, all the
nice.
all the outlets we know and love.
Are there any well-known books or authors that you can mention, or do you have to be careful about that?
Yeah, I've worked with Valerie Bertinelli, Martina McBride on their cookbooks. I've worked with Siri Daly, who's a food blogger and married to Carson Daly, one of the Today Show anchors, on
Wow,
her cookbook.
fun.
I've worked with Sid and Shay McGee, who are well known on Instagram and, design experts and have a TV show on Netflix. So lots of really, really fun stuff.
Funny story about Valerie Bertinelli. Way back when social media was taking off in PR, this is how many years ago? Like 10 years or more. There was a survey about when you were in high school, who was your celebrity crush?
Yeah.
And I think I tweeted Valerie Bertinelli because I love that show One Day at a Time.
Hmm.
And she actually liked my tweet and shared it. And I was in heaven.
Oh, that's so funny.
So
She's
Valerie,
wonderful.
if you're watching or listening, great to hear your name again. At any rate, I think people across jur- uh, PR pros across industry sectors are finding it sometimes increasingly challenging to get the attention of the media and get results. And I'm assuming it's more or less the same in publicity. I haven't worked in that area, but is it a challenge in that area as well?
It is. I mean, as we all know, newsrooms are shrinking. There's, a lot more reliance on freelance writers, but even then, as outlets fold, then those freelance writers lose their, income and their, places to write every now and then as well. So we really try to diversify our campaign. So, of course, pitching traditional media, but we're also going after social media influencers. That bookstagram and book talk are incredibly popular in the
Ah,
industry. So we're always looking for, the visual medium there of people reading, reviewing, and posting our books. And then podcasts. I mean, we work on a variety. We primarily work within nonfiction. So it's a lot of health, a lot of cookbooks, a lot of
fun.
psychology, self-help, fitness, all of those types of genres. And there's truly a podcast for everything.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Sounds fun and interesting. Have you been on these celebrity book tours? Do you actually accompany the
I
authors?
I used to do a lot. So in a previous role when I worked in-house at Time Inc. Books, so that was when I worked with a lot of the celebrity authors. Um, yeah, we I would book them. So we would, figure out 5 city, 7 city book tours. There were no longer budgets for me to travel along with
Uh,
them, but I was always, booking travel, making sure they had their hotels secured, arrival times, regional media in all of those cities. So yeah, it's that was, all pre-pandemic times. Book events are coming back. There was certainly a lull with them. Bookstores, there's, independent bookstores, they vary. So some will absolutely do events. They know how to do it. They know how to have successful events. And then there's some independent bookstores that just don't do events. They, may not have the bandwidth for it. It is, when you're not a celebrity name, it is a lot harder to get people to attend those. It certainly matters having that built-in audience.
Is it a fairly good work-life balance in your field? Do you have to go out there sometimes for events and things at off
Yeah,
hours?
yeah. There's, a pretty good work life. It's, fortunately, knock on wood, not too much within crisis communications.
Good.
Most book
Yeah.
PR is pretty fun. We get our campaigns are, very have specific timelines. So our campaigns are typically 3 to 6 months. So it's not, going on for an endless amount of time. We can be pretty structured with it. The longest days are if we're getting up for a morning TV hit or, an evening book event, but those are always fun to do. So I
I
can't
see.
complain.
Yeah, I think getting back to the challenges, I mean, I think I know those firsthand because I'm a blogger, I'm a podcaster, so I get a lot of pitches that are just not well targeted or timed. Spam, pitch spam.
Yeah.
And I think that is still being done, unfortunately, quite a bit in our industry, despite the fact that I don't think any of us will agree that it's a working tactic. I should say that a very well-timed and targeted pitch came from Abigail, who connected us. So this is a little
Yeah.
bit how the sausage is made, but it worked well. She sent a very nice pitch, and the topic seemed great. So that's why we're having you on here.
Thank
Um,
you.
oh, you're welcome. But getting back to overcoming those challenges, I know you had kind of a specific list of tactics that you use. Maybe we can go through each one of them.
Yeah, starting with what you just mentioned, timing. It is one of those things that I love, but also can be a bit of a thorn in my side, if you will, because you think you might have the timing perfected and something's coming up, an event's coming up, and you're going to the right person with the right pitch at the right time, but maybe they don't respond. Like a recent example of this is we had a gymnastics book that we were working on last summer, timed to the Olympics, Summer Olympics, very specific campaign. So, I was pitching the book, but also pitching the author for, timely
Right,
interviews,
right.
especially commenting on like the gymnastics events as they were going on. And then, we got lots of great coverage. She wrote a couple op-eds about being a competitive athlete, but I'm still getting responses to my pitches now. Even in January, February, earlier this year, people still wanted to talk to her more about like body focused issues and things that also impact women and fitness. So it was interesting, like, oh, even though I was pitching last summer, these journalists were still holding on to my pitch and then came to me when they needed an expert on that, and that ended up being 8 months later. So it's just
Wow.
fascinating when you think you have the timing right, but then they'll keep, they'll hold on to it because it is a good fit, just not the right time.
Isn't but don't you indicate that it's time sensitive in the pitch or what the what when it's happening?
Yeah, certainly. But I think we do care about maintaining those long-term relationships with our authors as well. So, if a journalist reaches out even after the fact, we're still gonna follow through on that media opportunity.
Yeah, they still want to sell books.
Yeah.
Um, but what about, is there a difference between the lead time for journalists and editors versus contributors, freelancers? Does that matter much?
Yeah,
Would you say?
I think so. Especially if you're, some of our books we might position around like holidays coming up. So, May with Mother's Day or, even May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we'll do that editor pitch, 6 months in advance. So when they're working on planning out their, print issues or editorial calendars, but then we might do a pitch for dedicated to freelance writers, specifically closer to, to that hook date because
I
their
see.
lead time is often much shorter and they're working on assignments or they're working on, you know, they might have deadlines that are just a couple days versus months.
Thinking about assignments, what about assignments that your media contacts might get versus ones they have to pitch to editors? Is there a different way to approach that situation?
Yeah, we use a lot of reactive sources. So across Quoted, TMX, SOS is a new one that just came from the former
That,
Help a Reporter
yep.
founder. So we use a lot of those to keep track of, we want to make sure we're on the list for these freelance journalists for when they're saying, hey, I need an expert in finance, I need an expert
Um,
in golf. So I was just pitching one of our golf authors. I worked on his book, a little less than a year ago. But it's the Masters, so there's certainly media opportunities for him to chime in as a golf expert this weekend. Um, so yeah, so there's, we want to make sure that we're on those writers' radar so that
Uh,
they're coming to us saying, "Hey, I have this last minute opportunity. Is your expert available?" And then, we love to meet deadlines, so we try to work and hustle and make that happen.
There you go. That's the job, right? You mentioned quoted in SOS, but there was the second one you mentioned. What was that? ST something.
TMX. So
TMX.
that's from two former Today Show producers. So they've
Oh,
launched a new platform. I mean, they've had it for about 5 years, but they've gone more out to media and PR now. And so it's very similar with reporters and
oh,
newsrooms being on the platform saying what they need, but also publicists sharing their press releases, pitches, so that they're really building those, real
yeah.
relationships between both sides of media.
Do they cover a number of industries and areas, or are they specific to anything
Yeah,
like
yeah,
both?
they're doing everything. So they'll split up, they'll do daily emails both on the media side as well as the PR side. And then it's split up into, certainly breaking news, more lifestyle, entertainment. So they certainly categorize it as well.
Sounds good. And as far as how can we make the journalist job easier and then hence hopefully improve our success rate?
Yeah, I mean, anything that you can do. I mean, deadlines are certainly the most important. Pay
Mm,
attention. I know, I having come from the journalist side of things, I do know how deadlines, how serious they are. So a lot of it even relates to our clients too, to let them know like deadlines are deadlines. Like if you're, a few minutes late, that's on you. Like I'm telling you what the deadline is. I typically will try to build in time with my clients too to like, I'll say the deadline's maybe a day earlier than it actually is to make sure that I get it from them on time versus what the journalist's actual deadline is. And then, especially if you're sending attachments or any sort of assets, make sure they're labeled properly. If people are downloading things to their computer drive, like they need to be able to find them quickly. So make sure things are very clearly labeled with, name, product name, client name. I always put photo credits within the title, within the
right, right.
file name as well, because they're going to need that info. And that when they're downloading it, that just makes it that much easier for them to find and be able to share within their feature.
Makes sense. All great tips. One I saw in the list that you said was something about headlines, thinking in terms of headlines. What does that mean? How can we apply that
So that's
to?
actually a way I've been using AI recently is all,
Oh,
brainstorm my headline. Like, I care so much about what an email subject line is. I think that's the first way that you're getting a journalist's attention. You want it to be short and sweet, but still say enough that they understand what you're trying to say. I'll write it a bunch of different ways, but then I'll also ask AI like any ways to improve this. And it has come up with words that I'm like, I never would have thought to put that word in there, but I actually love that more. That's
wow.
stronger. So it's been a way for me to like tap into AI, but still maintain my personal ethics with the use of it. But help with brainstorming and save some time as well.
That's great to hear. I mean, I think the reputation AI has is for not being terribly creative or interesting, but you find that with headlines or subject lines in an email, they can do that. They can.
I've been impressed with it. So, trying different sort of hooks, things that I want to make sure it says. But yeah, also just coming up with like other word choices.
That makes sense. Um, are there other ways of pitching or getting the journalist's attention? I'm sorry, rather than like say email pitching, are there other ways that you can get on the radars of journalists, do you think?
We, I think, especially when we're reaching out to people, bookstagrammers or people that are on Instagram. So even through social media, we do a lot of DM pitching these days, especially like within Bookstagram, Book Talk. But even with people that have podcasts where maybe we might not be able to find their email online, we love a short DM pitch. And
That's awesome. That's a
yeah.
great tip. How do you find, I mean, this is something I've discussed with previous guests, but finding, alternative media like podcasts or newsletters. Do you have any special tactics? It's just a matter of brute force, hard work, doing research.
Yeah. Yes, I have my employee Abigail. She is deep in our Google research. So I'll
Yeah.
say, here's a finance author that we're working with right now. Go find me everything related to finance and, do a deep dive on podcasts, Apple Podcasts, comb through different lists of roundups of podcasts on this topic. And then, there are certain sort of check marks that we have. So, okay, has this podcast released, are they consistent with their episodes? Have they released episodes within the last few months? Do they look like they have a schedule? Are they actually interviewing experts? Like, we don't want to pitch a podcast that doesn't have people on it. That makes us look bad. And then we have sort of secrets to finding emails. So my favorite tip is you can find someone's email on Instagram. It only works on your phone. It does not work when you're using Instagram, like on your computer browser. But a lot of journalists or podcast people or anyone that has, a platform on the site, they will have the email button in their profile. And so that's how we find a lot of emails.
Nice hack. Thank you.
Of
I
course.
appreciate it. I'm sure the audience will too. What other any of the tips? That's quite a bit right there, but were there any other ones you can think of off the top of your head?
Um,
I think there was one about know the outlet's voice and audience. I guess
oh
that's
yeah.
might have kind of covered that, but
Yeah, I'm certainly doing your research. So we also set up Google Alerts. So if we're working with a particular genre, so I, have if we have parenting books or I have, an author and a longtime client who's a friendship expert. So I just have a Google alert set up for friendship, quote unquote. So then I'm seeing every day coverage that's coming out on the topic of friendship, and that's giving me new outlets and new people to pitch because they are legitimately writing about this topic. So it can also come up with, we had a book on toxic mold. We had, so there's different, even more of a general genre. I have a Google alert for thriller. So I'm seeing who's covering thriller books, and that's just giving me more people to pitch each day and keeps the campaign going. So yeah, so that also helps us see, the specific outlet, what outlets are covering these topics, which journalists are writing about them. Those, that's delivered directly into my email. So that's saving me the time from doing that research every single day. And then I can go through, see the article, see the person. Okay, is this something that they're covering consistently? And that really helps me tailor my pitch to say, hey, just saw this article, thought you might be interested, any help craft follow-ups, see anything. How does this book and author relate to, how they've covered it in the past? How can I brainstorm new topics that might be a fit for them? Different spins on how they've covered it recently.
that's really interesting. Along those lines, I've spoken with others, and at our agency, we are researching too, using various kinds of automations through AI. You mentioned AI before, that was more ChatGPT. There's agentic AI, different kinds of AI that can maybe automate some of those things you're talking about, going out there and doing searches, maybe just an alternative to the Google alert approach. I don't know. I'm experimenting with it, but I think it has promise.
Yeah, that's interesting. You found success with it so far?
I would say, yeah, I'd say in the early stages, experimentally, you have to be careful of letting the AI run loose on too many things. Like, I don't know if I'd want it to handle my engagement on social media or doing things. Yeah, at this point, the technology, let's face it, is still rapidly evolving, and we're not sure. Sometimes we're honestly not quite sure what it's going to do, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
it's fascinating to think like the version of AI that we're using right now is the dumbest version because it's only getting smarter.
good. That's a good point. I mean, I just love this area. I'm a big fan of reading myself books, long form content. They say, unfortunately, that long form content is dying, I guess, maybe. I don't know. What is your take on the state of the book industry? Is it a pretty vibrant sector you're serving? And you have a good group of clients? Is it healthy?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's more books being published now than there ever have been. I mean, there's
Hmm.
something like 50 million, 60 million books just on Amazon alone.
Wow.
Obviously, that includes the self-published, independently published market. And there's, it's hard because I hear that, oh, are people reading less? Is the industry dying? I mean, books are never going to disappear. They're certainly under attack in certain ways, and that's hard to see for an industry that is, people that work in books are so truly passionate about books.
Yes.
So we always are cheerleading the industry. I think it's also great to see new innovation within the industry. So really encouraging people, if audiobooks are your preferred platform, like more power to you. Like listening to a book is reading, and I think that can be, a little bit shamed in society. And I think that's a bit
My wife
ridiculous.
loves audiobooks. I don't really, I
Yeah.
haven't gotten into them too much, but she loves them. So yeah, listen, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're listening or reading. as long as you're enjoying the content and getting something out of it.
Exactly. It's still consuming and you're still, taking it in.
Now, I took a stab at writing a book, a nonfiction book. I'm considering a business one. Hopefully, if I find a
Ooh,
publisher, I'll come to you.
please.
Do you work, by the way, do publishers have exclusive publicity agents they work with, or do they, how does that work?
It completely varies. So we found through there is certainly a need for agencies like mine because not every author is, given the service of a full PR and digital marketing campaign through their publisher. Sadly, we're also the department that's first to be let go when there are,
Um,
recessions or layoffs. That's typically they'll cut PR and marketing first. So that's why there is a need for us. There's also, like I said, so many self-published authors that want to support your book. When you're competing against, 50 million other books on Amazon, you have to do something to get people to find your book. They're not going to find it on their own. So there's a need for us there. We work with a handful of independent publishers, so they'll hire us, for longer term contracts where we're slated to work on, X number of titles for them for the year, just because they may not have those, a team in-house. Please, if you have a book in mind or you're working on it and want to hear more about PR and digital marketing, please reach out. We're always happy to have, those introductory calls to see what your book is, who you are, and share, who we are and how we can help.
that sounds great. I mean, I'll leave your information in the show notes so people know how to contact you. But I'd like to say thank you, Kourtney, so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing your insight. It's great meeting you, and I hope we can keep in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.